At the beginning of the semester, me and my fellow classmates were tasked with creating a web page that explains a lesson in detail from a previous course that we have taken. The real test within this assignment had to do with one's ability to create an effectively formatted web page for students who are now taking the course to utilize. The first step in this assignment was to research what aspects make a good web page and what may contribute to its demise. After a quick search, I compiled my top 10 list for creating a web page. After establishing a solid basis of understanding, I was ready to begin my writing. The most important thing for me to consider while creating my web page was to make sure I was following all the guidelines I had just established for myself. Number 1 on my list was to not overcrowd the web page. This is vital as too much information or too many graphics can be overwhelming to the reader and prevent them from reading the entire web page. There is also an additional bonus from keeping a web page simple. When readers scan, you can use graphics or large fonts to make the most important information stand out. I utilize this tip in my web page by using a more open layout and keeping open and white space on the page. Second on my list was to keep the web page concise. By this, I mean that it must be simple and straightforward, and readers should understand the topic and gist of the page before even having to scroll down. I utilize this aspect by including the definition of pregnancy at the top of my web page. Readers can also conclude the topic of my web page based just off the title, The Miracle of Life. Next on my top 10 was to always remember to write to your audience. This stands for all forms of writing. However, it is even more important for web pages as the reader has the option to click away at any moment. My audience for this web page was students taking the course, so I made sure to keep it simple and define any word that may be of confusion. I also made sure to have graphics that may be helpful to put things into perspective, such as the graphic displaying what cervix dilations look like in terms of everyday items. My next writing tip was to summarize. It is important to include only the necessary information and remove all fluff, especially in a web page situation where it is visually overwhelming. While this may seem like I included a lot of signs and symptoms in my web page, these are just the most common and important ones. This is actually the result of me combing through all of the signs and including only the ones the students would need to know. The fifth web page tip was to avoid using technical terminology. This point can be tied with knowing what audience you're writing to. Readers should not have to venture from your web page to look up definitions. In instances where certain terminology must be used, you should always define it, which you can see I have done throughout my web page, as pregnancy has very specific terminology that I was unable to avoid using. Next on my list was to edit out the superfluous. If the text does not fit or does not contribute necessary information, get rid of it. I've utilized this tip in my web page by including only the information vital to the pregnancy process, like the first, second, and third trimesters. Up next on my top 10 was to simplify navigation of the web page. Not everyone is tech savvy, so it is important not to overcomplicate things. I chose not to include any hyperlinks in my web page, honestly because I could not figure out how to add them, and I felt that there was enough information provided on my page alone. Graphics are number 8 on my top 10 list. Graphics can be used as a visual aid to break up text, to reinforce concepts, or to introduce a new concept. Most of the graphics I included were for the benefit of visual aids, representing what I had previously presented in the text. Second to last on my list was using headers and subheaders. This makes the web page more visually appealing and easier to navigate. I used larger, bold text for my headers and included subheaders where needed. The final aspect of web page writing on my list was to proofread. Just because a web page is not an essay does not mean it doesn't need to be proofread. Even the most visually appealing web page can be unreadable if it contains spelling and grammar mistakes. I proofread my text as I wrote it, as well as after I included it in my page to check for any mistakes I made while entering it. In conclusion, compiling my top 10 list has strengthened my writing abilities and has given me a checklist to use for my further creation of a web page. This list proved extremely helpful for this assignment, and I believe my web page was stronger because of it.